Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Elder of Rock. I am Stephen Elder, and here in a little thing I like to call Best of Us, where I go over some cool best of greatest hits compilations from bands that maybe you want to check out in case you don't know where to start with a band. Sometimes it's cool to go to a compilation. And this next one here I have is a very interesting one for me. It was the first album I got from this band. Uh, I first heard of this band because a friend of mine brought over he had a album, and we're talking vinyl albums here. This is back in the 70s and or late 70s. He had a vinyl album. It was something called Heavy Metal. The album, it was called Heavy Metal, and it was a compilation of different bands. Um, I guess of what they thought was heavy metal back then, because it had the Allman Brothers, the Eagles, the Grateful Dead, but it also had Alice Cooper, MC5, and it had a song called Iron Man by Black Sabbath, and that was the song that blew me away off that album. I remember having to listen to that song over and over again, and then realizing I had to go get an album by Black Sabbath. So I went uh, and to my local whatever record or department store. I think it was a department store, if I remember correctly. It might have been a department store called Gold Circle in Dayton, Ohio. But I remember I got this compilation. We sold our soul for rock and roll. Actually, let me take it out of here because I put that red case on there and it didn't really come like that. Well, this is a CD. Of course, it didn't come like that because I didn't have a CD. But I got this album, this vinyl album. This is what it looks like. So it wasn't red. That's what I'm trying to say. We sold our soul for rock and roll. And why did I get this one? Black Sabbath, of course, had a few albums out by then because this was like 77 or 78 when I first got this and heard this. So they had obviously had some albums out. And I think I got this because it was cheaper than buying two Black Sabbath albums separately. And I got this one. I get two albums, and for not as expensive because they would do that back then. I think they do that. Man, if they do that now for CDs, I think they do. But anyway, you get two, and I figured this was like it had Iron Man on there, so yeah, I was sold. And I figured I was getting more Black Sabbath this way, even though maybe wasn't getting like the greatest Black Sabbath. It was still a good intro for me. Um, so the songs on here are Black Sabbath, The Wizard, Warning, Paranoid, War Pigs, Iron Man, and Wicked World. Now, on my original vinyl, it didn't have Wicked World on there. That was the first. Well, I guess that would have been the first LP. That's right. If I remember right, the first. Okay, but on the LP, the first side was Black Sabbath, The Wizard, and Warning, and on the second side, it was Paranoid, War Pigs, and Iron Man. And like I said, no Wicked World, but it's on this CD, and that's cool. Um, and then the second LP, if I remember correctly, was Tomorrow's Dreams, Fairies Wear Boots, Changes, Sweet Leaf, Children of the Grave was the first side of LP2, and then the next side was Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Am I Going Insane, Laguna Sunrise, Snowblind, and NIB. so, so this leans heavily, especially on their up to Volume 4. Um, their first two albums actually really being represented the most on here. Because after this, I went out and after this, okay, I got to get more Black Sabbath. This is just tip of the iceberg. So I think the first time I went out and got was Paranoid because it had Iron Man and stuff on it, and um, but but it's kind of maybe. I mean, I'm glad I got it though because hey, if I wouldn't have got Paranoid, I wouldn't have got to hear Electric Funeral and Hand of Doom and Rat Salad and even Planet Caravan. But about half the album was on this album already. But the songs that weren't on there, it was worth me getting those for on Paranoid anyway. And then I don't remember what I got after that, but yeah. So like Volume 4, and especially, or I mean, I'm sorry, Bloody Sabbath and Sabotage really aren't represented on here that well. I mean, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is a good song. I guess that's a good representation for Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. If it's not a, but yeah, but am I going insane radio off of Sabotage? You know, that's not like, but I think they're just going for commercial appeal because this was an album that was put out by one of their old managers. If, let me see what I got here. Yeah, it said that the old manager Patrick Meehan, they had uh, control of their back catalog up to Sabotage, they um, so they had it and they put this out because yeah, there's a, it's a Tony Iommi like didn't even know this album was out till a fan came up and asked him to autograph it, and so they weren't getting any money off of this, unfortunately. Now there's also a couple different versions of this out, or there's a volume 1 and volume 2, and they have different covers. And um, I believe that um, volume 1 was probably disc 1 of this or whatever, and then obviously volume 2 would be disc 2 of this. Um, yeah, and then obviously Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die were never represented. So it's weird how that can kind of and around this time I had gotten this it was all in the, like kind of a little bit in the press that troubles with Ozzy was leaving. Those albums back then weren't regarded as being Sabbath's best albums, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. um I remember even reading a review in Hit Parader. There was a magazine that was out back then that had a review of Never Say Die, and it said, "Even when you're already dead." so, so it wasn't seen as a great album. Um, and then this did come out. I don't know. Maybe we can get this now as not an import, but I got this as an import a long while ago. Um, like I said, for some reason I felt a connection to this. I put this on because it just reminds me of the when I first discovered Black Sabbath, and it's not a bad compilation. I mean, yeah. I mean, could Am I Going Insane could have been like Hole in the Sky or Symptom of the Universe or something. Yeah. Laguna Sunrise and Change the I remember when I heard those, I was like, what is this? This is the same band that did Iron Man. What's going on here? There's not even any drums or electric guitars on any of it. Um so yeah. So like I said, obviously this was going for more of the hits on here. But like I said, I do have like I just had to get this. It was cool. And then also another thing about this was that when I got the album, uh, it was a gatefold, and when I'm seeing this, can kind of I'll put I'll kind of freak you out as a kid. Like it's kind of coming in blurry there. Oh yeah, I'll put it up. But yeah, but this is this kind of like a little freaky girl in a coffin holding a cross. Is she dead? Well, I mean, I know she's not dead, but is she supposed to be dead? I don't know. And then this CD version has these cool pictures, which my original um, vinyl didn't have these in there, and that as well. And then in this you get some lyrics, which I didn't get in my original um, vinyl LP. Get some lyrics. I didn't know. So back in the day when you had to figure out the lyric, I didn't get any lyrics to these songs for a while, but that's all right. Um, and then also this came out in a single CD version in the States for a while, and but it had like a couple songs off of it. I can't remember if I remember. I don't know if it was. I think Laguna Sunrise and Changes. Well, that would have been cool if these were left off. I don't know for sure if that's were the ones that were left off. It could have been Sweet Leaf or something. Maybe I'm thinking of Speak of the Devil when they left that off the original CD version of that. So yeah, so we sold ourselves for rock and roll. Pretty good compilation if you are maybe if you're looking for a place to start with Black Sabbath. They do have a few compilations that I think they put out since then. And like I said, oh yeah, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. It's really weird how just hearing bad stuff about those, you can kind of um, point you away or from those, not getting those. I didn't listen to those for a long time after because I just never heard those were good uh, albums by Black Sabbath. And then a friend of mine that I worked with, he had all of them, and he said, "You never heard Technical Ecstasy?" And I was like, "No." And then listened to, wow, it's pretty good. And Never Say Die was okay. However, I could kind of understand, people like warm up to these albums now, and I'm not saying they're bad, but I can kind of understand how people were upset about Black Sabbath putting out, uh, especially some of the stuff on Never Say Die. Like this, there's a song on there called Air Dance, which I really like. I think it's a really cool song, but I can understand, like, if you were a fan of Black Sabbath and a couple albums earlier, they had given you Sabotage and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and now you're hearing something like Air Dance and break out with all the saxophones and the horns and be like, yeah, I can kind of understand where you maybe would be a little upset about Black Sabbath. Um, so yeah, but anyway, but those albums are what they are, and they're kind of cool. They have their good moments on them, and as far as a capsule in time for a band, I think that's kind of cool. Now that you can look back on things like that with a band like Black Sabbath, and you know, um, kind of realize what they are and appreciate the good things about them. So anyway, but yeah, so there you go. We sold our soul for rock and roll. Black Sabbath, uh, but influential album for me because this is my first foray into Black Sabbath, and I end up liking them ever since through all the different lineups and all the different albums, and I liked them ever since, obviously. Yeah, so there you go. So thank you very much for listening, for tuning in to the Elder of Rock, listening to me ramble about Black Sabbath. We sold our soul for rock and roll. And we'll see you next time.